My son's wife told me my garden was clutter and poured concrete over my roses. I didn't scream. I called my landscaper. When he showed up with a demolition crew to rip out her gazebo, she called the police, on herself. The rain in Portland, Oregon is not just weather. It is a mood. It is a soft grey blanket that wraps around the Douglas firs and drips rhythmically from the eaves of the craftsman bungalows. For 30 years, I have loved this rain. It feeds my hydrangeas. It wakes up the moss on the stone pathways. It is the lifeblood of the 2 acres I have tended with my own hands since 1994. My name is Rosemary Bennett. Most people call me Rose. I am 65 years old, a retired professor of botany, and I know a thing or two about roots. I know that if the roots are deep, the plant can survive almost anything. But I also know that there are some invasive species that cannot be pruned. They have to be dug out, completely. It was 11 o'clock in the morning on a Monday when I pulled my station wagon into the long gravel driveway of my property. I had been away for 3 days, just a short weekend trip to the coast to visit an old friend and watch the storms roll in off the Pacific. I was looking forward to a cup of tea and a walk through my English rose garden. But as the house came into view, my foot slammed onto the brake pedal. There, sitting squarely in the middle of my driveway, blocking the path to the garage, was a massive steel container. It was bright, aggressive, orange. A dumpster. It sat there like a wound, ugly and jarring against the lush greenery of my front yard. I stared at it through the windshield. The windshield wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down to a disaster. I did not order a dumpster. I put the car in park. I stepped out into the drizzle. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel exhaust. My son, Jason, and his wife, Kayla, lived in the main house. It was a beautiful 1920 craftsman with a wide porch and leaded glass windows. 2 years ago, after my husband passed away, I decided the house was too big for me alone. I built a charming 600-square-foot accessory dwelling unit, a cottage really, at the back of the lot. I moved into the cottage. I let Jason and Kayla move into the main house, rent-free. "Just for a few years, Mom," Jason had said, his eyes full of gratitude. "Just until we save enough for a down payment in this crazy market." "Of course," I had said. Family helps family. I walked toward the dumpster. It was piled high with debris, drywall, old carpet, trash bags. And then I saw it. Resting on top of a pile of broken 2x4s was a wooden handle. It was dark, oiled ash wood, worn smooth by decades of use. My heart stopped. I reached up and grabbed the handle. I pulled it down. It was a garden trowel. But not just any trowel. This was hand-forged steel. It belonged to my father. He had bought it in England in 1950. He had taught me how to plant bulbs with this tool. I had used it to plant every single rose bush on this property. It was thrown in the trash like garbage. I looked back into the dumpster. I saw my pruning shears, the heavy-duty loppers, the vintage watering can made of galvanized zinc. My tools, my history, my father's legacy. All of it tossed into a steel bin to be hauled away to a landfill. If you have ever felt the cold, sharp shock of seeing your most precious memories treated like someone else's trash, if you know the specific rage that comes from being disrespected in your own home, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Because I am about to show you that you do not have to take it lying down. My hands were shaking. I clutched the trowel to my chest. The metal was cold against my jacket. I did not go to my cottage. I walked straight toward the main house, but as I rounded the corner to the backyard, I stopped dead in my tracks. The sound hit me first, the grinding mechanical roar of a cement mixer. I looked at my garden. My garden was famous in the neighborhood. It was a sanctuary. It was a riot of color. Foxgloves, delphiniums, and over 50 varieties of roses. It was designed to be wild and romantic, a place where bees hummed and the scent of damask filled the air. But the center of the garden, the heart of it, was the circular bed where I grew the peace roses. My late husband, Robert, and I had planted them on our 10th anniversary. They were massive, established bushes with blooms the size of dinner plates, creamy yellow edged with pink. They were gone. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The circular bed had been ripped out. The earth was churned up, raw and muddy. The rose bushes were nowhere to be seen. In their place was a wooden formwork, and inside the wood, men in rubber boots were pouring wet, grey concrete. Standing at the edge of the construction zone was Kayla. She was 29 years old. She called herself a lifestyle curator. She made her living, if you could call it that, by posting videos of her life on the internet. She was wearing a beige tracksuit that matched the beige house she wanted, and the beige furniture she bought, and the beige life she lived. She was holding her phone up on a tripod, a ring light glowing in the overcast morning. "Okay, guys," she was shouting at her phone, putting on that fake, high-pitched voice she used for her followers. "I am so excited for this reveal. We are finally getting rid of the clutter and creating a dedicated mindfulness space, manifesting that Zen energy." I walked onto the grass. My boots sank into the wet soil. "Kayla!" I screamed. It was not a polite shout, it was a guttural cry. Kayla jumped. She spun around. The construction workers stopped pouring concrete. The mixer engine idled down. "Rose?" Kayla looked at me, her eyes wide. Then a look of annoyance crossed her face. She quickly tapped her phone screen to pause the recording. "Rose, oh my God, you scared me," she said, putting a hand over her heart. "You were back early. I thought you were staying until Tuesday." I walked up to her. I held up the rusted trowel in my shaking hand. "Where are my roses?" I asked. My voice was trembling, but it was low and dangerous. "What?" Kayla asked, feigning confusion. "The peace roses," I said. "The ones that were right here. The ones Robert and I planted 30 years ago. Where are they?" Kayla sighed. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "Oh, those huge thorny bushes?" she asked. "We had to remove them, Rose. They were massive. They took up the whole yard. And honestly, they were kind of messy. Petals everywhere, bees everywhere. It was a hazard." "A hazard?" I repeated. "They were a prize-winning collection." "They were clutter," Kayla corrected. "Look, I am trying to build a brand here. My aesthetic is modern minimalist, clean lines, neutral tones, open space. Those bushes were just chaotic. They didn't fit the vibe." "You dug them up," I whispered. "Did you transplant them? Did you move them?" "We didn't have time for that," Kayla said, checking her manicure. "The crew just chipped them. They are in the dumpster." Chipped. She had put my husband's anniversary gift into a wood chipper. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I looked at the wet concrete. "What is this?" I pointed at the grey sludge oozing into the hole where my heart used to be. "It is a gazebo," Kayla squealed, her face lighting up. "But not like an old lady gazebo. It is a Zen pod. It is prefabricated cedar slats with a yoga platform. I am doing a partnership with the company. They gave me a discount in exchange for the content. It is going to be the backdrop for my new meditation series." "You poured concrete," I said. "Permanent concrete. In my garden." "Our garden," a voice said from the back porch. I looked up. My son, Jason, was standing there. He was holding a mug of coffee. He looked tired. He looked soft. He looked nothing like the man his father had raised him to be. "Jason," I said, "did you know about this?" Jason shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He couldn't look me in the eye. He looked at the mud. "Kayla really needed the space, Mom," he mumbled. "She says the garden was overwhelming her. She has anxiety." "She needs visual calm." "Visual calm?" I shouted. "She destroyed $20,000 worth of landscaping. She threw my father's tools in the trash." "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Rose," Kayla snapped. She stepped between me and Jason, asserting her dominance. "Those tools were rusty old junk. I bought Jason a nice new ergonomic set from Target. They are plastic. They won't rust. You should thank me." "I do not want plastic tools," I said. "And I do not want a Zen pod." "Well, It is too late, Kayla said, gesturing to the wet concrete. The foundation is poured. The kit arrives tomorrow. And honestly, Rose, you need to learn to let go. You are hoarding memories. It is unhealthy. She took a step closer to me. She lowered her voice, but the venom was clear. Besides, she said, we talked about this. You gave us the house. This is our home now. We are the ones living here. We are the ones maintaining it. You are in the granny shack out back. You are basically a guest, and guests do not get to dictate the landscaping. I stared at her. I stared at the woman who was living under my roof, burning my electricity, using my water, and destroying my life, all while paying absolutely nothing. I am not a guest, I said. I am the owner. On paper, maybe, Kayla scoffed. But this is my yard now. This is my space, and I am going to decorate it how I want. So please take your rusty little shovel and go back to your cottage. I have to finish this video before the light changes. You are ruining my engagement metrics. She turned her back on me. Okay, guys, she chirped at her phone, resuming the recording as if I didn't exist. Sorry about that interruption. Just dealing with some negative energy, but we are cleansing it, manifesting peace. Jason looked at me. He gave a weak, apologetic shrug. Just let her have this, Mom, he whispered. It makes her happy. Happy wife. Happy life, right? Is that what you think this is, Jason? I asked. Happiness? It is just a garden, he said. Plants grow back. Not these ones, I said. And not this relationship. I turned around. I did not storm off. I walked with purpose. I walked to the dumpster. I climbed up the side, ruining my good wool trousers. I reached in and pulled out my father's trowel. I pulled out the shears. I pulled out the watering can. I carried them in my arms like a wounded soldier. I walked past the main house. I walked past the wet concrete. I walked all the way to the back of the lot, to the small, cedar-shingled cottage that was supposed to be my retirement sanctuary. I opened the door and stepped inside. It was quiet. It smelled of lavender and old books. I went to the kitchen sink and washed the dirt off my father's trowel. I dried it carefully with a towel. I hung it on its hook by the back door. Then I walked to the bedroom closet. I knelt down and pulled up the loose floorboard in the corner. I did not trust banks with everything. I kept a fireproof lockbox there. I dialed in the combination. Click, click, click. The lid popped open. Inside were my passports, my will, and a thick envelope made of manila paper. I took the envelope to the kitchen table. I sat down. I put on my reading glasses. I pulled out the documents. The first was the deed to the property. Rosemary Bennett, sole owner. The second was the document Jason and Kayla had signed 2 years ago. It was not a lease. I hadn't wanted to charge them rent, so I hadn't used a standard lease agreement. Instead, I had used a tenant-at-will agreement. I read the clauses. Clause 4. Tenants shall not make any permanent alterations to the property, including structural changes or significant landscaping, without the express written consent of the landlord. Clause 9. This tenancy may be terminated by the landlord at any time, for any reason, with 30 days written notice. I looked out the window. I could see the orange dumpster. I could see Kayla posing in front of the cement truck, making a peace sign with her fingers. She thought she had won. She thought that because she was loud and I was quiet, she was in charge. She thought that because she was young and I was old, I was irrelevant. She called it her yard. She called me a guest. I picked up my phone. I did not look at social media. I pulled up my contacts. I scrolled down to A, Alvarez Landscaping. Mr. Alvarez had been taking care of my heavy pruning for 20 years. He was a man who understood soil. He was a man who understood respect. I pressed the call button. Hola, Mrs. Rose. His voice boomed through the speaker. Long time no see. You need some mulch? Hello, Mr. Alvarez, I said. My voice was steady now, cold as the winter ground. I do not need mulch. I have a job for you. Okay, what are we doing? Planting the spring bulbs? No, I said. I have a structure that needs to be removed. and some debris. Debris? He asked. Like fallen branches. Like a gazebo, I said. And concrete. Fresh concrete. A gazebo? Mr. Alvarez sounded confused. I didn't know you had a gazebo. I didn't until this morning, I said. It is an unauthorized structure built by a tenant. It is sitting on top of my peace roses. There was a silence on the line. Mr. Alvarez knew those roses. He had helped me deadhead them every July. They covered the roses? He asked. His voice dropped an octave. They chipped them, I said, and poured a slab. Madre de Dios, he whispered. That is a sin, Mrs. Rose. I need it gone, I said. All of it. The wood, the concrete. I want it scraped down to the bare earth. When? He asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. 7 o'clock. Can you bring the excavator? For you, Mrs. Rose. I will bring the big one. Good, I said. And Mr. Alvarez? See? Do not ring the doorbell at the main house, I said. Just come straight up the driveway. I will meet you with the work order. Understood, he said. I hung up the phone. I looked down at the tenant at will agreement. I picked up a pen. I turned the paper over. On the blank backside, I began to write. Notice to vacate. My handwriting was cursive, elegant, and sharp. Kayla wanted a clean background for her brand. She wanted to remove the clutter. She wanted to get rid of the things that didn't fit her vibe. I finished writing. I signed my name. Rosemary Bennett, Landlord. I looked out at the rain falling on the roof of the cottage. She was right about one thing. Some things in the garden were weeds. They looked pretty on the surface, but they choked the life out of everything around them. And tomorrow morning, I was going to do some weeding. I did not sleep that night. Sleep is for the innocent and the ignorant, and I was neither. Instead, I spent the hours between midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning at my small kitchen table surrounded by maps. I pulled out the original plat maps of the property from 1994. I pulled out the city zoning codes for Portland, specifically Multnomah County, regarding accessory structures and setbacks. I traced the property lines with my finger. I located the main sewer line that ran from the street to the back of the lot. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. The spot where Kayla had poured that concrete slab, the spot where she had murdered my peace roses, was directly on top of the main utility easement. In the city of Portland, it is illegal to build a permanent structure within 5 feet of a property line or over a utility easement without a variance, and variances take months to approve. I checked the city's online permit database. Address: 429 Southeast Elm Street. Active permits: none. She had built an illegal structure. She had poured concrete over a sewer line. She had violated 3 different city ordinances. I was not just the aggrieved mother-in-law anymore. I was the enforcer of the law. I printed the codes. I printed the map. I clipped them to a clipboard. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a heavy, damp mist hanging over the yard. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. I showered and dressed. I did not put on my denim gardening overalls. I did not put on my rubber muck boots. Today was a business day. I put on a pair of black slacks, a crisp white blouse, and my charcoal grey blazer. I put on my leather loafers. I pulled my grey hair back into a tight, severe bun. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like Grandma Rose from the cottage. I looked like Professor Bennett, the woman who once failed a student for plagiarizing a thesis on photosynthesis. I made a pot of strong black tea. I sat by the window and waited. At 7:30 in the morning, the activity began at the main house. I watched through the sheer curtains. The back door opened. Kayla emerged. She was wearing a matching sage green yoga set that looked like it cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She was carrying props. She set up a tripod. She dragged out 2 beige beanbag chairs and placed them on the grass next to the drying concrete. She unrolled a white rug. She placed massive vases of dried pampas grass, that awful shedding, dead-looking weed that influencers seem to love, around the perimeter of the slab. Then a delivery truck arrived. 2 men jumped out and began unloading flat-pack boxes. The gazebo kit. "Put it right there," I heard Kayla shouting, pointing to the slab. "And hurry, I have a live stream at 9 o'clock. I need the frame up for the background." The men worked fast. It was a prefabricated structure, cheap cedar held together with dowels and screws. Within an hour, the skeleton of the Zen pod was standing. It looked flimsy. It looked alien. It looked like a temple to vanity built on the grave of my husband's roses. Jason came out around 8:30. He was holding a smoothie. He looked nervous. He kept glancing toward my cottage, checking to see if I was watching. I stepped back from the window so he would not see me. "Is Mum up?" I heard him ask. "Who cares?" Kayla replied, her voice drifting through the damp air. "She is probably sulking. Let her sulk. Once she sees how good this looks on camera, she will get over it. We are improving the property value, Jason. She should be paying us a management fee." "A management fee?" I laughed out loud. It was a dry, sharp sound. At 8:55, Kayla started her live stream. She clipped a small microphone to her collar. She stood in front of the half-finished gazebo, framing herself so the muddy mess of the destroyed garden was cut out of the shot. "Good morning, my loves," she chirped, waving at the phone. "Welcome back to the journey. Today is a huge day. We are finally reclaiming this space. We are getting rid of the old heavy energy and bringing in the light. Look at this progress." She spun around, gesturing to the wooden frame. "This is going to be our sanctuary," she said. "A place for yoga, for breathing, for being." Then she paused. She frowned. She tapped her ear. "Do you guys hear that?" she asked the camera. I heard it too. It started as a low rumble deep in the earth. A vibration that rattled the teacups on my table. It grew louder. A heavy mechanical grinding sound, the sound of diesel engines and hydraulic pistons. Kayla looked toward the driveway, her face lit up. "Oh my God," she squealed. "That must be the white gravel delivery. I ordered 2 tons of crushed marble to go around the Zen pod. You guys, this is happening so fast." She grabbed the tripod. "Come with me." "Let's go see." She ran toward the driveway, filming as she went. Jason followed her, looking less enthusiastic. I picked up my clipboard. I picked up the tenant at will agreement. I picked up the eviction notice. I opened the door of the cottage and stepped out. The noise was deafening now. Rolling up the long gravel driveway was not a gravel delivery truck. It was a flatbed transporter carrying a John Deere 160G excavator. It was a 20-ton machine with a digging arm that could reach 20 feet. Behind it was a massive dump truck with Alvarez Landscaping painted on the side in bright green letters. Mr. Alvarez was driving the lead truck. He was wearing his neon yellow safety vest and a hard hat. Kayla stopped running. She lowered her phone. Her smile faltered. That is a really big truck for gravel," she said to Jason. The truck air brakes hissed. Psh! As they came to a halt right in front of the main house. Mr. Alvarez killed the engine. He climbed down from the cab. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with hands the size of shovels. He did not look at Kayla. He looked past her, scanning the yard. He saw me walking up the path. He tipped his hard hat. "Good morning, Mrs. Rose," he called out. "Good morning, Mr. Alvarez," I said, walking steadily toward them. "Thank you for being punctual." Kayla looked from me to the excavator, then back to me. "Rose?" she asked, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "What is going on? Did you order some dirt or something? Because you cannot dump it here. I have the reveal happening." "I did not order dirt," I said. I stopped in front of them. I stood on the paved walkway, my clipboard held against my chest. "Mr. Alvarez," I said, ignoring Kayla completely. "The scope of work has changed slightly since we spoke on the phone." "Oh?" he asked, crossing his arms. "I need a full hardscape removal," I said, "and debris clearing. There is an unauthorized structure in the rear yard. It is sitting on an illegal foundation poured over a city utility easement. I need it demolished and the site graded back to natural soil. Kayla's face went pale. "Wait," she said. "What?" "Also," I continued, "there is a significant amount of biological waste in the dumpster. Please ensure that is hauled away as well." Mr. Alvarez looked at the dumpster. He looked at the half-built gazebo in the backyard. He looked at the fresh, wet concrete. He grinned. It was a wolfish grin. "You want me to take out the concrete?" he asked. "Jackhammer it," I said. "Load it up. I want it gone." "No!" Kayla screamed. She stepped forward, thrusting her phone in my face. She was still streaming. "You cannot do that," she yelled. "That is my gazebo. I paid for that kit. I paid for that concrete." "And you poured it on my land," I said calmly, "without a permit and without my permission." "Jason," Kayla spun around to my son, "do something. She is crazy. She is going to destroy our sanctuary." Jason looked at the massive excavator. He looked at Mr. Alvarez, who was already signaling his crew to unload the machine. "Mom," Jason stammered, Maybe we can talk about this. Kayla worked really hard on this design." "There is nothing to talk about," I said. "Clause 4 of your agreement, Jason. No permanent alterations without written consent." "Did I give you written consent?" "Well, no, but did I give you verbal consent?" "Mom, come on." "Did I?" "No," he whispered. "Then it is an illegal encroachment," I said. "And as the property owner, I am liable for any code violations. I am simply mitigating my risk." "Risk?" Kayla shrieked. "You are just jealous. You are jealous because I am making this place look better than your dusty old jungle ever did. You are a bitter old woman who hates change. If you have ever dealt with an entitled brat who thinks improving your property means destroying everything you love and then calls you bitter for protecting what is yours, you know the fire that was burning in my chest. But fire, if controlled, is a cleansing agent. If you are ready to see this influencer get a reality check that no filter can fix, hit that like button." I turned to Mr. Alvarez. "Proceed," I said. "You got it, boss," Alvarez said. He climbed into the cab of the excavator. The engine roared to life. A cloud of black smoke puffed into the air. Kayla panicked. She ran toward the backyard. "You cannot go back there," she screamed at the machine. "My bean bags! My pampas grass! Stop!" She stood in the middle of the driveway, blocking the path of the machine. Mr. Alvarez stopped. He looked at me. "She is blocking the right-of-way, Mrs. Rose," he shouted over the engine. I looked at Kayla. She was trembling, holding her ground, filming herself crying. "This is abuse," she sobbed into the camera. "My mother-in-law is attacking me with a bulldozer. Please, someone help." "Call the police." "Call them," I said. Kayla froze. She looked at me. "What?" "Call the police," I repeated. "In fact, I will do it for you." I pulled out my phone. I dialed the non-emergency line which I had saved the night before. I put it on speaker. "Dispatch," a voice answered. "Hello," I said. "This is Rosemary Bennett at 429 Southeast Elm Street. I have a trespasser on my property obstructing a contracted demolition crew. I would like an officer to assist." "A trespasser?" Kayla gasped. "I live here." "Not for long," I muttered. "We have a unit in the area," the dispatcher said. "They will be there in 5 minutes." "Thank you," I said. I hung up. "You called the cops on me?" Kayla hissed. "On your own family?" "You threw away my father's tools," I said. "You destroyed my husband's roses. You told me this was your yard. I am just clarifying the boundaries, Kayla." Jason walked over to Kayla. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Babe," he said, "maybe you should move. That is a really big machine." "No," she pushed him away. "I am standing my ground. This is my home. I have rights, squatters' rights, tenants' rights." "You are a tenant at will," I said, reading from my clipboard, "which means you have the right to occupy the dwelling. You do not have the right to obstruct the landlord from maintaining the grounds." The excavator revved its engine again. Mr. Alvarez was getting impatient. He revved it loud, a mechanical growl that shook the ground. Kayla flinched. She looked at the giant steel bucket with its serrated teeth. She looked at her fragile beige beanbags in the background. Then, a siren chirped. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out. "What is the problem here?" the older officer asked, walking up the driveway, his hand resting on his belt. "Officer!" Kayla screamed, running toward him. "Thank God! Arrest her! She is trying to bulldoze me! She is destroying my property!" The officer looked at me. I stood perfectly still in my blazer, holding my clipboard. "Ma'am?" the officer asked me. "Officer," I said. "I am the property owner. Here is the deed." I handed him the clipboard. "And here is the contract regarding the unauthorized structure currently being built in the rear of the property over a city utility easement. I have hired this licensed contractor to remove it. This woman, my son's wife, is obstructing the work." The officer looked at the papers. He looked at the excavator. He looked at the half-built gazebo. "Is that true?" the officer asked Kayla. "Do you have a permit for that structure?" I don't need a permit," Kayla stammered. "It is a temporary structure. It is a Zen pod." "It is poured concrete," the officer noted, looking at the mixer. "That is permanent, ma'am. And if it is over an easement, it has to go." "But I live here," Kayla cried. "Do you own the property?" the officer asked. "No, but—" "Then you cannot stop the owner from landscaping," the officer said. "You need to step aside and let the crew do their job." Kayla's mouth dropped open. "You are siding with her." "I am siding with the deed, ma'am," the officer said. "Step aside, or I will have to detain you for disorderly conduct." Kayla looked at the officer. She looked at her phone, which was still recording. She realized she was losing the narrative. "Fine," she screamed. "Fine. Destroy it. See if I care. My followers are going to cancel you, Rose. You are going to be the most hated woman on the internet." She grabbed her tripod and stomped onto the grass, out of the way of the machine. I nodded to Mr. Alvarez. "Take it down," I said. Mr. Alvarez smiled. He pulled the lever. The excavator lurched forward. The tracks crunched over the gravel. It rolled past the house. It rolled into the backyard. It approached the Zen pod. Kayla was sobbing, holding Jason's arm. "Do something, Jason. Stop them." Jason looked at me. I looked back at him, my face like stone. He looked down. "I can't," he whispered. The excavator arm reached up. It hovered over the flimsy cedar frame of the gazebo. Then it came down. Crunch. The sound of splintering wood filled the air. The bucket smashed through the roof of the gazebo like it was made of matchsticks. Kayla let out a scream that sounded like a siren. Mr. Alvarez lifted the bucket, dragging the entire structure with it. He swung the arm around and dropped the wreckage onto the pile of dirt where my roses used to be. Then he aimed for the concrete. He swapped the bucket for a hydraulic breaker attachment. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. The jackhammer sounded like machine gun fire. It smashed into the wet, curing concrete. Chunks of grey slab flew into the air. The foundation cracked and crumbled. I watched. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched the destruction of the invasive species. It took less than 20 minutes. The gazebo was kindling. The concrete was rubble. The backyard was a muddy, chaotic mess. But it was my mess. Mr. Alvarez cut the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. Kayla was sitting on one of her beige beanbags, weeping. Her mascara was running. Her perfect aesthetic was ruined. I walked over to them. The officer was still standing by the driveway, making sure things stayed peaceful. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the envelope I had prepared the night before. "Jason," I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. "Here," I said. I handed him the envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a 30-day notice to vacate," I said, "per Clause 9 of our agreement." "Mom," he choked out, "you are kicking us out? Where are we supposed to go?" "I heard there are some nice apartments downtown," I said. "Very modern, very minimalist, no yard work required." "But we are family," he said. "Yes," I said, "and family respects family. You stood by and watched her throw my father's tools in the trash. You stood by and watched her destroy my husband's roses. You let her treat me like a stranger in my own home." I looked at Kayla, who was staring at the eviction notice in Jason's hand. You wanted a clean slate, Kayla, I said. Now you have one. I turned around. Mr. Alvarez, I called out, load up the debris. I want this dirt ready for planting by tomorrow. You got it, Mrs. Rose, he shouted. I walked back to my cottage. I didn't look back. I had a lot of work to do. I had to order new roses. I had to amend the soil. But first, I was going to make a cup of tea, and I was going to drink it in peace. The 30 days following the demolition of the gazebo were the longest and quietest 30 days of my life. The air between the main house and my cottage was not just cold. It was frozen. It was a silence so thick you could cut it with pruning shears. I did not see much of Jason or Kayla. They moved like ghosts behind the drawn shades of the craftsman house. Occasionally I would see Jason trudging to his car in the morning, his shoulders slumped, carrying the weight of a man who knows he has made a terrible mistake but lacks the spine to fix it. Kayla, on the other hand, was busy. She was not packing boxes quietly. She was waging a digital war. A friend of mine from the university sent me a link to one of Kayla's videos. I watched it on my tablet with a cup of chamomile tea. The video was titled, Bullied Out of My Home, The Toxicity of Boomers. In the video, Kayla sat on her floor. Tears streaming down her face, tears that looked suspiciously aided by eye drops. She talked about how she was being displaced by a narcissistic landlord who didn't understand her creative vision. She didn't mention the illegal concrete. She didn't mention the destroyed heirlooms. She didn't mention the fact that she had been living rent-free for 2 years. The comments section was a mix of sympathy from teenagers and confusion from people asking why she didn't just buy her own house if she was so successful. I did not comment. I did not engage. I simply closed the tab and went out to water my hydrangeas. I knew something Kayla did not. I knew that internet fame is an annual plant. It blooms fast and dies hard. But reputation is a perennial. It comes back year after year. Moving day arrived on a Tuesday. It was raining again. Of course it was. Portland has a sense of humor. A rental truck backed up the driveway, carefully avoiding the patch of bare earth where the gazebo used to be. I stood on the porch of my cottage, watching. They carried out their beige furniture, the beanbag chairs, the pampas grass vases. Then they started bringing out things that belonged to the house. I saw Jason carrying a vintage brass light fixture that had hung in the dining room since 1925. I walked out into the rain. "Jason," I called out. He stopped. He looked terrified. "Put that back," I said. "Kayla said we bought it," he stammered. "That fixture is original to the house," I said. "It was listed on the inventory I gave you when you moved in. If it leaves this property, I will file a report for theft." Kayla marched out of the house carrying a box of neutrals. "God, Rose," she shouted, "keep your dusty old lamp. We don't want it anyway. It doesn't fit the aesthetic of the new place." "Put it back, Jason," I repeated. He turned around and walked back into the house. It took them 4 hours to load the truck. When the last box was in, Jason walked over to me. He held out the keys to the main house. "Mom," he said. His voice was cracked. I want you to know." "Save it, Jason," I said. "You chose your soil. Now you have to grow in it." He looked at me with wet eyes. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to tell him it was okay, that he could come back for Sunday dinner, that I would fix this like I had fixed his scraped knees when he was 6, but he was 32, and some scrapes leave scars. "Goodbye, Mom," he whispered. He got into the truck. Kayla was already in the passenger seat, staring at her phone, refusing to look at me. They drove away. The taillights disappeared into the mist. I walked into the main house. It echoed. They had taken everything, but they had left their mark. The walls, which used to be a warm, creamy yellow, had been painted a stark, sterile white. The hardwood floors were scratched, but the house breathed a sigh of relief. I could feel it. The energy of entitlement had left the building. I went to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee. And then I called Mr. Alvarez. "They are gone," I said. "We can start planting." 3 months later. Jason stood on the balcony of his new apartment. It was called the Slate. It was a luxury complex in the trendy Pearl District, which sounded nice until you realized it was built directly over a streetcar line. The apartment was on the 4th floor. It was 800 square feet. It cost $3,200 a month. Jason took a sip of his lukewarm coffee. Below him, the city noise was relentless. Sirens, construction, the screech of the streetcar wheels. There was no green, just grey concrete, glass, and steel. Inside the apartment, Kayla was setting up her ring light. The living room was cramped. Her beige beanbags took up half the floor space. "Jason!" she yelled. "Can you stop chewing so loud? The microphone is picking it up." Jason sighed. He walked inside and set his mug down on the particle board counter. "I have to go to work," he said. "Wait," Kayla said. "I need you to hold the reflector. The lighting in here is terrible." "It is too grey. My skin looks washed out." "I am going to be late," Jason said. "I have to pick up extra shifts, Kayla. The rent is due next week." "Don't stress me out about money," she snapped. "I am manifesting abundance. Just hold the reflector." Jason looked at his wife. He looked at the white walls that felt like a prison cell. He looked at the fake plant in the corner because the management didn't allow real plants on the balcony due to water runoff concerns. He thought about the craftsman house. He thought about the wide porch. He thought about the smell of rain on soil. He thought about the rent, $0. He realized then that he had traded a paradise for a parking lot, all because he was too afraid to tell his wife, no. "I am going to work," Jason said. He walked out the door. He didn't slam it. He just closed it softly, like a book he was tired of reading. Back on Elm Street, it was spring. The earth has a way of forgiving you if you treat it right. It doesn't hold grudges like people do. If you feed it, if you water it, if you tend to it, it gives back. I was on my knees in the dirt. The soil was rich and dark, amended with compost and aged manure. Mr. Alvarez was digging the holes. "This is good stock, Mrs. Rose," he said, holding up a bare root rose bush. "It is," I agreed. I had decided not to replant the peace roses. Those belonged to a different era, a time of compromise and softness. Instead, I had ordered 20 bushes of a variety called Mr. Lincoln. It is a strong, tall hybrid tea rose. It has deep, velvety red blooms. It has a powerful fragrance that you can smell from the street. And, most importantly, it has thorns. Big, sharp, unapologetic thorns. "Put that one right in the center," I said, pointing to the spot where the gazebo used to be. Mr. Alvarez placed the bush in the hole. I packed the soil around the roots with my bare hands. I felt the connection. I felt the life returning to the land. We worked all morning. By noon, the circular bed was restored. It wasn't full yet. Roses take time. But the structure was there. The promise was there. I stood up and wiped the dirt from my knees. A car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the rental truck. It was Jason's sedan. He parked. He got out. He was wearing his work clothes, but he looked disheveled. He looked thinner. He walked up the path. He stopped at the edge of the new flower bed. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello, Jason," I said. I didn't take off my gloves. He looked at the fresh dirt. He looked at the empty space where the Zen pod had been. "It looks good," he said. "It looks like you again." "It is getting there," I said. He shifted his feet. He looked at the main house. "The apartment is... It is really loud," he said, "and expensive. We are burning through our savings just to pay the rent." "That is how the rental market works," I said. "Kayla is really unhappy," he continued. "She says the lighting is bad for her brand. She says she feels trapped." I didn't say anything. I just picked up my watering can. "Mom," Jason said, his voice dropping to a plead, "I was thinking, maybe we could try again. I know we messed up. I know I messed up. But if we came back, I promise I would control her. No changes, no gazebos, just us living in the house again." I looked at my son. I loved him. I would always love him. But I looked at the new rose bush I had just planted. If you plant a rose too close to a walnut tree, the toxin from the tree roots will kill the rose. It doesn't matter how much you water it. It doesn't matter how much you love it. The proximity is poisonous. No, Jason, I said. He blinked. No? You cannot come back, I said. But Ige, why? He asked. The house is empty. You are just living in the cottage. I like the cottage, I said. And I like the quiet. And frankly, Jason, you need to learn how to tend your own garden. You cannot live in mine anymore. But we are struggling, he said. Then struggle, I said. Struggle is how you grow roots. If I keep propping you up, you will never stand on your own. He stared at me for a long time. He realized, finally, that the bank of Mom was closed. Not just the money, but the emotional labor. Okay, he whispered. Okay. He turned around. He walked back to his car. He looked older than he had when he arrived. I watched him drive away. Mr. Alvarez walked over to me. He leaned on his shovel. That was hard, he said quietly. Pruning is always hard, I said. But it is necessary for the bloom. I picked up the hose. I turned on the water. A gentle spray fell over the new bushes. The sun broke through the clouds. A single beam of light hit the wet leaves. A bee flew past my ear. It hovered over the soil looking for a place to land. Welcome back, I whispered to the bee. I looked at my yard. It wasn't perfect. There were still scars in the grass where the heavy machinery had driven. There were still patches of mud. But it was mine. I took a deep breath of the wet, earthy air. Kayla had wanted a clean slate. She had wanted a background. I didn't want a background. I wanted a life. A messy, thorny, beautiful life. And as I stood there in the mud, with dirt under my fingernails and the sun on my face, I knew I had finally found the root cause of my happiness. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. It was the boundaries. I turned off the hose. I walked back to my cottage. I had a cup of tea to drink. And for the first time in 2 years, it tasted exactly like peace.